Hello everyone and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Kerwin, and on today's episode I have Michel Lundell, and he is the founder of Ketonix, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So to just give you a little bit of background about him, he is the inventor and founder of the Ketonix breath ketone analyzer, which is the world's first commercial ketone breath analyzer available. Michel has a background as a software engineer and invented the Ketonix to help him manage his own personal treatment of epilepsy. So, Michel, thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
Thank you for letting me come.
Yeah, so I've been wanting to get you on for a long time because I personally have a Ketonix device, and I know it's unfortunately the one of the first devices out there. So this is an old version compared to what's available on the market nowadays, where you've been upgrading the device even more. But so I've had a keen interest in ketosis and measuring nutritional ketosis. And I love the idea that you don't have to do something invasive. You can use your breath to be able to analyze that. So before we get into that scenario, I'd like the listeners to be able to maybe understand why you developed the Ketonix device in the first place.
Okay. It started out when I got a diagnosis of having epilepsy. I had 2 seizures, grand mal seizures, and after the second one, they said, you got epilepsy, so you have to eat this medicine for the rest of your life. And they gave me something called lamotrigine, which is it should be a kind form of epilepsy drug. But after 1 year on this drug, my family noticed that my personality had changed a lot. So I wasn't the person they know 1 year earlier. So I had to find alternative to this medicine. And while doing that, I found the ketogenic diet for epilepsy is have the same efficacy as medication. So I told my neurologist that I want to change. I want to try this diet instead because the side effects are not as bad as the drugs. And he actually asked me to get 2 weeks to study this. So it's probably not a common knowledge of neurologists to know about the diet. They get educated in medication and drugs instead. Anyway, he came back and he said, well, the efficacy is the same. So we can try this. But you have to prove that that you can manage this diet and get into ketosis. So he gave me a month to prove this, and I did like everybody else. I was peeing on strips. I was buying blood strips, and it was messy and it was expensive, these blood strips, and so. In the process of doing this, trying to get into high ketosis, I investigated the actual process in the body. Is there any other way to measure this? And I found that acetone is a byproduct. It's from the acetoacetate, which is produced when the body is in ketosis. So I did a lot of testing and found out that, it is better than the urine strips. And compared to the blood values, I couldn't really get a good correlation. But when I was in high ketosis, according to the blood strips, I also were in high ketosis according to my acetone device that I made for myself. So I started to develop this, and I contacted the diet doctor about this to see what do you think about a device like this, and he encouraged me to develop it further. And that's when Ketonix was born.
Oh, wow. So, and this is what I read back in about, it's not that long ago even, it was about 2012 or 20, when was your first seizure?
My first seizure was 2006. And the second seizure I had was 2012, 12, somewhere.
Yeah, so your story is interesting because this is adult onset of epilepsy. Yeah. So you didn't have it until a few years ago.
Exactly. They made a brain scan and they found something they thought was a brain tumor. So for 6 months, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and then they found out it doesn't grow. It doesn't. It just, there is something. They can't say it's a tumor. They can't say what it is. It's a UBO, unidentified brain object. So, but it's in the wrong place. So it might have been that caused my seizures, but they have no idea if it's that or not. So
yeah, because I've had Emma Williams from Matthew's Friends, and we've talked about using the ketogenic diet for epilepsy control and how it's only becoming a little bit more mainstream in the UK for children, but still a tiny bit. But for adults, it's also, as you said, you hardly hear of it being a treatment modality within the hospitals for adults with epilepsy. So I can relate to how at least you had a very forward-thinking neurologist who went, right, let's give this a go. So I'll be interested now. Are you still on any epileptic medication now, or are you completely managing your epilepsy through the diet?
I have no medication since it is that 2014. So it's 3 years without medication.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's brilliant. Yeah, that's what I love about this. To think you just changed your diet, which helped to heal your neurology, and you don't have to take very harsh medications which create severe side effects like you found, your family found, personality change. So because epilepsy medication is very strong.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so that's why I love this diet and ketones and brain health. So you've already touched a little bit on about the accuracy element, and I think that is something I would like to address of people wondering about the urine strips to test the ketone levels or the blood or the acetone levels through your device, the Ketonix. And I like it that you've already mentioned there's not a correlation between beta-hydroxybutrate, which is the blood test, and the breath, which is acetone. But there is a correlation between acetone and glucose, which I found interesting.
Yes. All these correlations have puzzled me for a long time. And all the tests that I'm doing, I'm breath testing maybe 20 times a day. And in the beginning, I was testing blood and glucose and pee strips and everything. The correlation between blood and acetone, the breath, then that is, it exists in some situations, but the big difference between beta-hydroxybutrate and acetone is that the beta-hydroxybutrate is the excess of acetoacetate, which isn't used for energy. So it's a buffer of energy that the body can use whenever is needed, and that is something that your body gets more efficient to produce. So in the beginning, a lot of acetoacetate spills out into the urine, which you can measure, and you can see that you increase the acetoacetate in the urine. Later on, when the body gets more adapted, more efficient of using this, it gets more into the blood. But the acetone comes from the acetoacetate and disappears. It doesn't buffer up in the body to be used. It just gets out of your body all the time. So when body is breaking down fat, it produces acetoacetate and acetone. The acetoacetate that isn't used will buffer up in blood. And this buffer in blood can be used by the body whenever it needs energy. It also reflects how well you can use this beta-hydroxybutrate. There's a man in South Africa, Robert Miller, that has studied this, and he says if you have high beta-hydroxybutrate and low breath acetone, you have an issue with NAD+, and that's getting technical. I don't think I should explain that. That should be Robert. But to me, having measured this so much, I would say it's a better correlation with glucose, because when your glucose is low, that means that your body is trying to refill your glycogen stores, and it might need some more glucose. But as you're not eating glucose and your carbohydrates, it's very easy for the body to produce the ketones instead to fill the gap of glucose. Mm-hmm. It's like when you start out a ketogenic diet, all your muscles want glucose to work before they get adapted. Then the body produces a lot of ketones. After a while, when you get adapted, your need for ketones get less because your muscles actually use the fat directly. So not everything gets converted into ketones. It's when you keto adapted, the brain and the heart is the most consumers of ketones. So when you fat adapted, and if you want high ketone levels, you have to actually trick the body into do stuff like, well, if you're fasting, that's one way. If you're doing strength exercise, that's one way to deplete your glycogen stores, and then your ketosis will raise.
Okay, so it's interesting how you're saying then if someone is only looking at their beta-hydroxybutrate, their blood test, for their level of ketosis, but it doesn't mean that you have the deeper the better, so the higher the number the better. In this case, that a fat adapted person doesn't mean that they're going to have, say, ketone levels in their blood of 3 or 4 all the time, because the body is managing it more efficiently. But they'll definitely be in a nutritional ketosis level of above 0.5 millimolar. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think that nutritional ketosis is measurable in blood. It's because the nutritional ketosis is more that your body is producing the ketones, and as I said, the beta-hydroxybutrate is a buffer. So even if you're in low ketosis for a long time, you could get a high beta-hydroxybutrate if you don't use it. If you're in high ketosis, you can get a higher beta-hydroxybutrate in a shorter time. You see the difference?
I'm trying to just wrap my head around that. So you could be in low level
ketosis and build up over time a higher beta-hydroxybutrate, or you can be in high ketosis and build up a high level of beta-hydroxybutrate in a shorter time.
Okay. So the relationship is that if you're in deep ketosis, in high ketosis, you will naturally have high levels of beta-hydroxybutrate. Is that right?
It depends on if you're using them or not.
Okay. And that's why I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around here is when you're looking to see if your body is fat adapted, which is why you needed to know you're fat adapted for managing epilepsy, that you found then using the blood measuring strips might not have been the most efficient way. You prefer to also have that knowledge of what's coming out through acetone.
What I want to know is that my body is producing what caused my body to produce ketones. If I measure beta-hydroxybutrate, it could be 0 because I've been out running, or I was lifting a big sofa from one room to another. I mean, when body needs energy, it takes it where it can get it. And beta-hydroxybutrate is just a buffer of excess ketones. It doesn't mean that you're actually producing ketones. It means that you have produced ketones. You have it in the blood, available for use whenever.
Okay.
So the acetone is coming from the acetoacetate. So if the acetoacetate isn't used for energy, it gets stored as beta-hydroxybutrate.
Okay.
But acetone is coming from the acetoacetate, not from the beta-hydroxybutrate.
Mm-hmm. And that's
why the correlation is. In some cases, in study environments where you just sit down and eat a lot of ketogenic meals and do nothing, of course, you produce a lot of ketones and you don't use a lot of energy, so they get buffered in blood, and you get the acetone from the acetoacetate. So both increase, but in normal life, you actually take your bike to work, or you walk upstairs and you do stuff. So the beta-hydroxybutrate isn't
going to be the same level
of burning fat. It tells you that you have been burning fat or taking exogenous ketones.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to maybe take us down that line a bit, because I did have a ketone researcher on the show, Brianna Stubbs, and she was mentioning how a lot of people are misconceived if they think, I take an exogenous ketone, I've raised my ketone levels, that I'll be losing weight by burning fat. And she was trying to get the point across that people mustn't take exogenous ketones thinking that they're burning fat, because they've, like you said, they've actually just tricked their body. They've just given their body ketones, but the body hasn't sourced those ketones from breaking down its own fat.
Exactly. The process isn't reversible more than that beta-hydroxybutrate could get into acetoacetate. It doesn't increase your fat burning. It might give people extra energy to go to the gym, however. And that makes them use more energy. So and tap into the fat stores.
So in your case, then, to manage a condition like epilepsy, you feel that it's better to rather go through the natural process of breaking down your own fat for the ketones versus taking a supplement.
For managing epilepsy, exogenous ketones could be one way. If you don't do it the diet way, it could be one way to give your brain the alternative fuel. But I think that the sugar and insulin itself actually makes damage to the brain. So and especially as I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, I do want to keep my blood sugar very low, as low as possible. So there's more benefits of producing your own ketones than drinking them.
And that's and that point where you were saying how you want to know that you're keeping your glucose down, that your body's controlling it better. The acetone is better to understand that, because I like the graphs that you've shared where you showed, was it a 5-day water fast where the beta-hydroxybutrate in the blood was rising, but the acetone wasn't doing the same. But I think it was about day 4, both acetone and glucose dropped. Well, acetone went up and glucose dropped at the same time. So
Exactly.
It showed nicely that you could use acetone to understand when you were managing your glucose better. If your acetone was going up, it meant you were dropping your glucose levels.
Exactly. And that is something that people get confused because they think that if I do 24 hours fast, I will be in very high ketosis, but it depends on your liver. If your liver have a lot of glycogen, it may take 2-3 days before actually your body needs to produce more ketones. And the interesting thing in that graph with the beta-hydroxybutrate is that when I had 1.0 millimolar per liter beta-hydroxybutrate, I had a blood sugar of, 6.87, and I had the same blood glucose 6.8 when I had like 3.5 or something millimolar in blood in beta-hydroxybutrate.
Oh, fascinating.
So the beta-hydroxybutrate is not a good predictor of having control over your blood sugar. The acetone was completely following the glucose, and this is not one thing. It's actually 3 or 4 weekly fasts that shown this, and the response I got from other is much the same. So the glucose and the acetoacetate, the acetone follows each other.
So I like that, knowing that information, because we've been talking about the ketogenic diet and raising ketones to manage a medical condition like epilepsy, but a majority of people out there are going keto or low carb and wanting to raise ketones for weight loss and type 2 diabetes management, for example, and managing and insulin resistance. And I like that information you shared there, that instead of someone focusing then on measuring their blood ketone levels, if they're just in the situation where they want to get, manage their glucose levels better, that potentially actually the Ketonix device measuring your acetone is a better way to also know that your body is converting into ketones versus glucose, and your glucose levels are going to be a little bit more controlled. Because you could be that was fascinating that you found, like, you have a very high ketone level in your beta-hydroxybutrate in your blood, but it doesn't mean that your blood glucose is well controlled.
Exactly.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so I'm always interested in also knowing how to measure and when to measure and how many times in a day. So, for example, like glucose testing postprandial. So someone would prick their finger 2 hours after meal to check what that meal did to their blood glucose levels. But I don't hear much about people trying to talk about how to optimize your ketone levels. Like, should you be checking your ketone levels like 30 minutes after eating a meal, or 2 hours eating a meal, or morning versus evening? Could you give any insight how many times a day you should be maybe checking your ketone levels for optimal health?
When I made this device for myself, I wanted to know how different things affected my ketosis, so I actually could optimize my ketosis by adjusting my lifestyle. So I wanted the device to be reusable, so I could test a lot. So I do test a lot. I test when I wake up. I test after my morning coffee. I test almost every hour to see how my body works. The other day I had some some vegetables, some carrots in a coleslaw, and that wasn't good for my ketosis. The day after, I was in very low ketosis. So if I just continue to eat my chicken and my spinach, I will have a much higher ketosis in the morning. The morning ketosis is always low because of your circadian rhythm. So the glucose and the cortisol levels are always making your body try to wake up. So your ketosis is low in the morning for most people. And then I can see it racing through the day. If I do training, exercise in the evening, fat burning exercise a long time, I will definitely have a higher ketosis in the morning too. So that's when it gets interesting, and that is what the device is to be used for, to find out what works for you. There isn't any magic numbers. If you have 4 ppm or 6 ppm or 3 ppm, doesn't really matter. It's actually your value. It's your body. Your body doesn't work like everybody else. So you cannot compare my morning values to your morning values, because you have a
different energy need.
Yeah, exactly. So it's for determining your own way of living. If you have good ketones after eating bacon and eggs, well, that's fine for you. But if you drink, for example, I tested the exogenous ketones. I was not in ketosis for 6 hours after one drink, ketone esters. And I was puzzled about this. How could the ketone esters actually get me out of ketosis such a bad way?
Was this the esters or the salts that you took?
I don't. Well, it was the keto.
Oh, okay. It's going to be the ketone salts then. Yeah, because the esters only they're not even commercially available yet. But that's fascinating. Yeah, could you explain that then? So you took a supplement to raise beta-hydroxybutrate, or a ketone salt, and you found it actually knocked you out of
it did.
Your ketone. And this is your breath acetone again dropped.
My breath acetone dropped, and actually my glucose went up a bit. So there's a lot of energy in this drink, and I was speaking to Peter Defty and others at this conference, and they said it's perfectly logical, because if you put in a lot of end product in your system, why should your body create more? I mean, it doesn't need more energy. This drink was a lot of energy. So, of course, my Ketonix, not my Ketonix, my ketosis stopped. It's like drinking alcohol. I mean, the body used that instead. Your ketosis gets shut off for a while until the alcohol is burnt off, and then it just continues.
Okay, so again, I love that, because what you're doing is biohacking. You're testing your own physiology, your N=1, your own experiment, and you've got the data because you've got your device and you can track things, and then you can play with different substances like a keto salt or different vegetables, and actually track what it does to your body, and if that's where you want to be going. Actually,
the software I made, you can donate your values to research. So we actually got a couple of 100,000 data points on using Ketonix and using whatever other stuff. So actually, I gave this database to Marty Kendall. He has a blog which is optimizingnutrition.com, So he got all these data points and actually found that high beta-hydroxybutrate is not maybe what you really are after. It's a better measure if you want to burn fat. A better measure is breath acetone.
Okay. And that again comes around to what the majority of people are actually going low carb and ketogenic for is weight management. So in this case, other than looking at what the scale is doing, if you want to know if you're actually in good fat burning mode, you could use your breath acetone to see, as long as that's going up, then your body is actually utilizing fat for energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I know why people using blood ketones to measure that. It's very simple. It's very simple for doctors. They've done that for many years. They take your blood anyway, and they take one drop, and it's very simple to find out the concentration in that simple drop. It's not so simple. It's not that hard either, but to make a proper measure with a breathalyzer there is technique, because the highest concentration is in the bottom of your lungs. So that's what people do. Well, they fail. They actually inhale before they exhale into the Ketonix. And just like swimming, they sometimes can't get the last air out. So when you're crawling, when you're swimming, you actually get in too much air in your lungs. So you feel that you get panic after a while. So the good technique is to find how much air you should have in your lungs when you start exhaling into the Ketonix. So you actually get the lowest air from your lung out into the sensor. And by doing that, you can actually feel the panic. So a good technique is when you feel the same panic. if you
okay.
You get the same feeling every time.
Okay, so because I wanted to go down there to actually educate people how to use the device efficiently. Because it's what you've invented here is so simple, where you can I've got it on my computer here, where I've just plugged the USB port in, it's powering up the unit, and it's a blue light saying ready to go. And as you said, most people would think, okay, take a deep breath in and then blow into the device, but that's not the way you want to be doing it. You actually want to just be in a comfortable place where you feel, okay, ready, and then you just blow, and you keep blowing into the device till you feel like you can't blow anymore. That's the optimal way of testing.
Well, actually, you blow 5 seconds more.
Oh, right.
But you can't blow anything more. You can actually push a bit more out. So
you could be blowing on this for quite a little while, because I found like I can keep blowing, but you just got, so it's not just a 3-second test. It's like, okay, keep blow, blah, 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 blah. And you're saying like really get to that point, and you think, oh, okay, now I need to take a breath, but then that's when you want to be checking.
Yeah, I think you get too much air into your lungs before you do the breath test. So I've been telling people now on the conferences that we've been having workshops on the conferences. So I just say that read a book, breathe through your nose, and before you breathe in, you put the mouthpiece to your mouth and then exhale as long as you possibly can. And that shouldn't be hard. It's just a very smooth blow until you cannot get anything more out.
Okay.
And that would get them into the most, the readings will be very accurate then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then as I mentioned, you've developed the device even more. There's more versions, more current versions of it, even what I've got, and there's software linked to that now. And so you've got the devices able to take those measurements and then graph it for someone on software on their laptop, is it?
Yeah, you can graph it on the website. You can graph it on your laptop, or the new one, you have your mobile device. So you have your Android or iPhone or a tablet. So you just need that. You don't need a computer, actually.
Oh, wow. And does that do it through, because I haven't used the software, do you have to manually input the number then into your phone or your tablet?
No, it's via Bluetooth. So
okay. Wow. So now you don't have to technically understand numbers. Your device will just talk to your phone, your app on your phone or something, and it will graph it for you.
Yeah. So you got a different. I don't know if you see it.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a gauge for anyone who's listening. So, yeah. Okay,
so there is this scale here is from 0 to 100, and 100 ppm is very high. That is almost ketoacidosis, I would say. Normal people get into about 0 to 10, maybe. So I got a zoom here. Makes it simple for them. And the green area is actually marking nutritional ketosis. I found it in a review of breath ketones.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody made a scale for breath ketones. So nutritional ketosis is between 4 and 30 ppm. And then you get a very high ketosis up to 80, and above 80 ppm, that's really, really
more
high.
of a problem. Yeah.
That is a issue, yes.
Yeah.
Problem.
Okay. So in your personal case then, where do you tend to float between, do you find?
I'm about 4, 5, 6 in the morning ppm.
Mm-hmm.
And I might be to 25, 35 in the evening.
And that's when you're that's like your deeper ketosis then at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love that graph. That makes it so simple to understand that because I actually wanted to ask you about acetone measurement levels, because people might understand with beta-hydroxybutrate, it's millimolar per liter, and the 0.5 and the 1s and the 2s. But with acetone and the older version that I had, it was the light color change and the flicker, but I didn't know about the ppm, the parts per million. So 4 ppm in acetone is what you're looking to achieve.
That's the new meters. We correlated them to another instrument. So you see ppm acetone, mm-hmm. which is in the literature. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So and that's for you personally, when so would you say you're always in nutritional ketosis or ketosis then, in your case, versus cyclical where you're bouncing in and out of it?
No, I'm not, because I'm experimenting a lot. So I do tests with a lot of protein. I do tests with different vegetables, different amount of wine, for example. I mean, 2 glasses of wine in the evening, it won't get me out of ketosis the day after, but 3 glasses will. So that's one test I made that is useful.
Mm-hmm. And does that matter between the grapes even? I'm just interested between red wine and white wine or rosé.
It definitely has to do with the amount of sugar in the wine.
So it will depend on the brand of the wine and how they've made it.
In Sweden, we have markings on the wine, so you can see how many grams per liter there is. So we always choose less than 3 grams per liter. When I was in San Diego the other year, there was a keto wine producer or seller.
Mm-hmm.
He had the same wines that I normally drink. So I don't think that was any special wine, really. Just any wine that is less than 3 grams.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess there might be some people listening who think, oh, can I still drink any alcohol and maintain fat burning? And can I have some fun by drinking still? And you're saying, yeah, if you can use the Ketonix here and see maybe, yeah, you're a 2-glass wine person if you want to stay in ketosis. But if you go too heavy, then yeah, just know it's going to take you a period of time to adapt again, to get back into that mode.
Yeah, and with the Ketonix, you see that how long it will take until you get back on track again.
Yeah. I didn't quite realize the power that you could utilize the data that you're getting from the Ketonix in that sense there, because I'm hearing more and more now from what you're saying about that correlation, the relationship between glucose and acetone in your breath. And so even here, eating different foods or taking different substances, which could be changing your glucose level, will be changing your acetone level in a way.
As fast, yeah.
Yeah. And fast. So what have you? Yeah.
Taking your breath ketones once a day doesn't say very much. Say.
And that comes back to why you want to be, and that's the beauty of the device. You can use it multiple times a day and get those data points like every hour or an hour after food or a particular substance and see what your body's actually doing now with the energy you've just taken in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So booze is a good one. We've just mentioned that. Any particular foods that you found you mentioned vegetables, which I think would be fascinating, that, yeah, you found certain vegetables were actually maybe a bit of a nutritional ketosis issue for you.
Yeah. Well, that's commonly known that you shouldn't eat vegetables coming from underneath ground. But anyway, I wanted to test because I like coleslaw and things like that. So I was testing how much can I eat to not get too much out of ketosis. So I can just manage I can still have a few sushi things and still be in ketosis the day after. Or I can make my own sushi with what do you call it, cauliflower rice instead, and then be in normal ketosis the day after. So it's a trial and error. I mean, you eat something and you see how does it affect me. Like the exogenous ketones, that just dropped. I dropped like a stone, and then took me 6 hours to get back.
So rice also then is definitely a problem. So a dosage of rice in your case, because
for me, yes.
Yes. And again, everyone's physiology is different with how their insulin responses are and their body's looking for energy. MCT oils, because that's very common on people going keto or low carb, that they also add in potentially MCT oils or different versions of MCT into the diet. Have you played around with that to see what it does to you?
In the beginning, it was more effective. It's not as effective now for some reason. I don't know. So the body adapts and changes. So even if one does a test 1 year ago and does it again, the results could be different because your body adjusted to what you're doing. If I drink a coffee with cream in it, my ketosis will decrease. So the cream in the coffee is not good for me. If I drink just coffee, it's no issue at all. So.
And have you tried butter in your coffee?
Yes, I have. When the cream is out, I use butter and coconut oil. Yeah.
And any correlation there? Anything you could find?
Well, that doesn't decrease as much as cream, but it doesn't raise it too much either. So black coffee is better for me in the mornings if I want to raise to get my levels up. So I just do sort of fasting with just black coffee.
Yeah, I personally found the feeling of drinking, because I like high fat coffees, and a double cream coffee for me, I don't feel as good as if I have a butter coffee. I feel much better actually having coffee with butter. I find the butter and the caffeine work much better versus even cream. And having milk and coffee, you'll really feel, if you're caffeine sensitive, you'll really feel the effects, I find, in that situation. But so we were talking about with the butter and the coffee there. So how much fat do you eat now? Because I know I was reading originally that you were, to manage your epilepsy, you were on the more classical ketogenic range, which was very high fat. So you don't need to stay there anymore now because you've managed your.
Yeah. At one time, I had extra butter to everything, but now I tend to try to reduce the fat more. I could use it. I could actually use some kilos. It wouldn't hurt me. I'm planning of running a marathon in next year, so I will try to reduce my cream and coffee and fat until I get down to the level I want.
Okay. And that was actually what I wanted to ask you. You mentioned fasting. What's been your experience with fasting and your performance or your ketosis levels?
If it wasn't it is the social issue that is the problem. To not sit down with your kids and eat. I don't think that's a good thing. When you sit down with the kids to eat, you should eat something. I don't think it's good for them just to see the father don't eat anything. I think they should have sort of a role model how to eat healthy, even if they don't eat what I eat. So they should get some kind of picture of eating as an adult, what that could be. So I've been limiting my fasting to just eat once a day in the evening with my kids. But I've done several weeks of fasting, and I can say when the acetone level gets up and the sugar gets down, I feel much better. When your ketones get high, then you feel much better. I don't want to stop. I mean, if I start on a Monday, the Friday, I don't want to start eating for a weekend or for another week or whatever. I don't feel hungry at all.
Okay. So you've personally found at the moment you like to have one big meal at the end of the day. That's more optimal for you, is it?
Yeah, it works.
Yeah. Okay. And you did mention protein earlier, and I know a lot of people freak out about protein and gluconeogenesis, and it's going to knock them out of ketosis. Anything you found?
I think that's very individual, depending on your lifestyle. It's not, if you calculate the ketogenic ratio and stuff, 54% is glycogenic of the protein. But depending on your energy status, if you are full of energy, it might get into glucose and get stored. But if you're exercising a lot, it's I think you can go maybe 2 grams per lean mass, even.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also get very low. If you just sit in an office all day, I don't think you need much protein at all. You can get down to 0.7 grams per kilo lean weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it depends on what you're doing. It's some are sensitive to it, some are not. So.
Yeah. And I guess this comes back to, you could use the device to graph yourself and see, if I have a massive big steak, just on its own, how does my body respond after that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And I know we're talking a lot about adults, but even children here, they can use the Ketonix device. As a parent, it could just for fun, you could see if your child is producing acetone. I don't know.
Yeah. I have 2 kids now. One is 11, one is 7. And 3 years back, when we started this out, I made some experiments with them, and there was not a big issue to teach somebody that is 3 years old how to do the correct measure. So it is workable. Children less than 3 years could be an issue to explain how they should to measure that, but I'm developing prototypes for small kids, dogs, and I even had a request for making a device for cows. So there is an interest in the animal segment too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can imagine trying to optimize the beef industry or the dairy industry, but the farmers being able to check the health of the cows through their acetone levels.
The cows eat grass. I mean, how would they not stop eating candy and cakes? I mean, they don't eat candy and cakes; they eat grass. Yeah. So,
well, hopefully, most of because I guess some farmers are feeding grain-based top-ups and that, so then they're checking what's happening to the animal. Then, what I'd like to end off it maybe with is that story of Alison and what she used your device for. Would you mind explaining her story?
Yeah, she was sitting one day and making bacons at her home, and her husband found her in front of the bacons burning, and she didn't do anything. So he thought something must be wrong with you. So he took her to a hospital, and they found she had a big brain tumor that was aggressive. Before they actually took it out, it was big like a baseball. So her eyes were almost popping out of the sockets, and it looked really bad. And she said that when she woke up from the operation, they said, "You're lucky because you can walk, you can talk, you can do anything, and but you will be back in a month or so, and we have to make this operation again, and it's going to be worse. You're not going to survive this." But she was determined to find a solution on this. She didn't want to die, and she found out that the Warburg effect some had a lot of good experience with the Warburg effect, that lowering your glucose will not feed the cancer cells. So she started a ketogenic diet, and she actually used a Ketonix to determine what worked for her. And that was lucky because her body could not metabolize coconut oil in the same way as it does for many. So by eating coconut oil, it actually raised her glucose. So it lowered her ketosis. So if she continued doing what other people were doing, like fat bombs, bulletproof coffees or whatever, just living on that, she says herself that she would be living any longer. But now she's have no issues, nothing with cancer or anything else. And that's 3 years ago or something.
Wow. So Alison's still with us today. She's still alive.
Yeah, very much.
So she had a baseball-sized tumor pulled out, and her doctor said it's aggressive, it's coming back, and unfortunately you're not going to survive the next episode. And she managed to biohack her own diet and go, right, I need to get into ketosis to stop feeding the cancer cells with glucose. and she was able to, through acetone measurement, figure out something. I didn't even know that. Yeah, so taking coconut oil was a no-no for her because it would knock her out of a deep ketosis.
Yeah. So she was talking about this in Vail 2 years ago, and that is available on YouTube. Mm-hmm. You can just look on Alison Gannett and ketosis.
Yeah, I'm going to link to that in the show notes to this episode. Yeah, that's going to be fascinating.
I also have a user that called me. He had prostate cancer, and by doing this diet, he got rid of that. So it is a powerful diet.
Yeah, and I think that's from all the researchers that I've interviewed and spoken about with an interest in ketones. It is the therapeutic use of ketones and ketosis, and for metabolic diseases and cancers, that's where a lot of the interest is going. And yeah, there are people who can't wait around who develop cancer, and it's fantastic when you hear stories of people with cancer at the moment who go the full hog, like a own experiment, and they get a positive result. So it's nice to know. And that's just diet.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, or anybody doesn't know that, well, what happens if you have cancer and you eat exogenous ketones? Will that work or not? I think not, because beta-hydroxybutrate doesn't lower your sugar.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway I think I've got from this, Michel. What you've explained to me is that, again, that relationship between glucose and acetone, and that glucose and beta-hydroxybutrate don't correlate perfectly together. That you could be false, maybe you could be, I don't want to say falsifying, but that you think, oh, right, I've got high beta-hydroxybutrate, therefore I must be better controlling my glucose, but that's not always the case. I think that's the biggest takeaway I'm getting from this too. Yeah, fantastic. So for any listeners here who now want to get themselves a Ketonix device, what's the best way to get one?
Well, you can get links from, if you're in the US, there is a US distributor. If you're in Australia, there is a Australian distributor. So you can buy from us, the international shop. Okay. So we are 5 people working there. We are 3 who quit our jobs just to complete the mission of helping others. There is 2 others that help us, 3 others that actually help us part-time with doing this too. So we are dedicating our full time to help others with issues.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
That's the ketogenic diet. Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for dedicating that, because you've really opened up the world of ketosis and just biohacking research there. It's so much more, and you've educated me even more today about the device. I knew about it, but not as much, nowhere near as much as what I understand about the power of being able to use the Ketonix now for different situations. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for inviting me to the show.